Have you ever walked away from a conversation and felt uncomfortable, even though nothing openly wrong was said? No harsh words, no obvious insult, no clear reason to defend yourself, and yet something in you tightened, a small silence, a strange heaviness, a feeling that you were being pulled, nudged, or emotionally cornered in some quiet way. No one tells you this after 50. But many mature women begin sensing manipulation faster than they did when they were younger. Not because they have become suspicious, not because they have become cold, but because life has given them something younger people often do not have yet: pattern recognition. And maybe you've felt this too. You hear a certain tone and something inside you immediately becomes alert. You notice when a compliment feels slightly too strategic. You sense when someone is asking for understanding before they have even shown accountability. You can feel when guilt is being placed on your shoulders without anyone directly saying, "This is your fault." It happens quickly now, sometimes in seconds. And what is so interesting is that many women struggle to explain this to others. They just know. They feel it. They cannot always prove it immediately, but their body reacts before their mind has time to form the full sentence. That is not irrational. It is intelligence shaped by experience. A mature woman has often lived through enough emotional patterns to recognize when words and intentions do not match. She has seen the apology that arrives only when consequences appear. She has seen the affection that comes when someone needs access. She has seen the silence used as punishment, the confusion used as control, the helplessness used to avoid responsibility, the tears used to redirect the focus, not always in dramatic ways. Often in ordinary life, in families, in marriages, in friendships, even with grown children. But no one really talks about this clearly. We talk about intuition as if it were some mysterious gift. And sometimes it does feel mysterious. But very often, what people call intuition is actually stored memory, emotional memory, relational memory. The nervous system quietly remembering what manipulation feels like before the conscious mind finishes analyzing it. That is why mature women often sense it faster, not because they have stopped being loving, because they have stopped being entirely innocent about how people behave when they want something. This is an important distinction. When women are younger, many are taught to explain things away, to be fair, to be kind, to not jump to conclusions, to stay open-minded. And those qualities are good qualities. They matter. But if they are not balanced with self-trust, they can make a woman doubt her own perception for far too long. She tells herself, "Maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe he didn't mean it like that. Maybe she's just stressed. Maybe I'm being too sensitive." And sometimes those explanations are true, but sometimes they are the language women use to stay emotionally safe inside relationships where naming the truth would create discomfort. By the time a woman reaches her 50s or 60s, something often changes. She has spent enough years watching behavior repeat itself that she no longer needs every pattern to announce itself loudly. She hears what is missing. She notices what is repeated. She feels when the emotional weight of a conversation is quietly being shifted onto her. For example, someone says, "I guess I'm just a terrible person then," instead of responding to what they actually did. A younger woman may get pulled into reassurance. A mature woman often pauses. She hears the deflection underneath the self-pity. Or someone says, "After everything I've done for you," not to express pain honestly, but to create obligation. Again, a younger self may feel immediate guilt. A more mature woman often feels something else first. Pressure. That feeling matters, because manipulation rarely begins with obvious control. It often begins with emotional repositioning. Someone wants to move your attention away from the actual issue and toward their discomfort. their innocence, their need, their fragility, their version of the story. The goal is not always cruel. Sometimes people manipulate because they are emotionally immature, ashamed, afraid, or deeply uncomfortable with accountability. But even when the motive is not malicious, the effect can still be controlling. And mature women sense that more quickly because age often brings emotional clarity. A woman who has raised children, navigated marriage, cared for aging parents, absorbed disappointment, managed households, survived seasons of loneliness, and watched people reveal themselves over decades, becomes very fluent in emotional subtext. She may not call it that. She may just say, something felt off. And often, she is right. It is a quiet truth that pain sharpens perception. Not always in a healthy way, of course. Sometimes pain makes people hypervigilant, but often in emotionally mature women, it creates discernment. They are less distracted by polished words, less moved by surface charm, less impressed by performance. They have seen too much to confuse emotional intensity with sincerity. That is why some women become quieter with age. Not because they have less to say, but because they are watching more carefully, listening more carefully, measuring actions against patterns, not promises, and what they notice is often subtle. Who only reaches out when they need comfort, who becomes defensive the moment accountability appears, who praises your strength but disappears around your need, who uses confusion so they never have to be clear, who gives just enough warmth to keep access, but not enough honesty to build trust. These are not small details. They are signals. The mature mind becomes skilled at reading them because it has paid for missing them before. And maybe that is one of the saddest parts of wisdom. It often arrives carrying a history. A woman who senses manipulation faster now may not have been believed in earlier years. She may have spoken up once and been told she was imagining things. She may have felt uneasy in certain relationships, but stayed because she wanted to be good, fair, loyal, patient, hopeful. She may have mistaken self-doubt for maturity. She may have ignored what her body was telling her because everyone around her preferred the more convenient version of reality that leaves an imprint. So later in life, when the same emotional pattern appears in a different face, or a different tone, or a different relationship, she feels it almost immediately, not because she is cynical, because she remembers. This is also why mature women often become less responsive to guilt-based behavior. They have learned that guilt can be one of the most efficient tools of manipulation, especially against women who were raised to be emotionally responsible for everyone else. If someone wants to control a woman who values harmony, they do not always need to attack her. They can simply make her feel selfish, ungrateful, harsh, disloyal, unkind, too difficult, too distant, too sensitive. And if she has spent a lifetime trying to be a good woman, a caring mother, a patient wife, a thoughtful daughter, a reliable friend, those labels can cut deeply. That is exactly why they work. But after enough years, a woman begins noticing the pattern itself. She begins to ask, why do I always feel guilty after talking to this person? Why do I leave this conversation feeling responsible for emotions that are not mine? Why does their pain always become the main subject, even when I was the one who was hurt? These are powerful questions, and one of the first ways to sharpen your instinct is to stop arguing with your first emotional signal, not obey it blindly. But do not dismiss it immediately either. If your body tightens, pause. If you feel sudden confusion, pause. If a conversation leaves you feeling pressured, small, foggy, guilty, or strangely off balance, pause. That pause is not weakness. It is data collection. Many women have been taught to override their pause in the name of politeness, to answer quickly, to smooth things over, to reassure, to explain. But manipulation often succeeds through urgency. It wants immediate emotional access, immediate guilt, immediate compliance. Immediate reassurance. The pause interrupts that. Mature woman who pauses gives herself something incredibly important. Room to see clearly. Another technique that sharpens instinct is very simple, but very powerful. Instead of listening only to what someone says, quietly ask yourself, what happens to me in their presence? Do you feel calmer or more responsible? Do you feel clearer or more confused? Do you feel respected or subtly managed? Do you feel free to have your own feelings or pressured to take care of theirs first? This question matters because manipulators often focus on controlling interpretation. They want you analyzing their words, their reasons, their wounds, their intentions. But your internal state during and after an interaction often tells you more than the polished explanation ever will. And mature women, especially those who have lived through emotional inconsistency, get better at reading that state. Not perfectly, but more honestly. If this resonates with you, you're not alone. Many women reach this stage of life and finally begin trusting instincts they spent years apologizing for. And there is another reason this sensitivity grows with age. As children grow distant, as marriages change shape, as family roles shift, many women begin paying closer attention to emotional truth because they have less energy for illusion. They no longer want to keep investing in relationships that depend on denial. They no longer want to keep calling manipulation miscommunication just to keep the peace. They no longer want to keep explaining away patterns that have already repeated too many times. That is not bitterness. It is emotional economy. At this stage of life, peace becomes more precious. Time feels more precious. Energy feels more precious. And because of that, a mature woman often becomes much less willing to ignore what her inner world is clearly telling her. She may say less, but she notices more. She may not confront every pattern immediately, but she sees it. She may still love deeply, but she no longer mistakes love for blindness. This becomes even more important because sensing manipulation is one thing, but understanding why certain people use it and why women so often feel guilty for noticing it opens up a much deeper emotional truth. You can share your thoughts in the comments if this feels familiar. Sometimes the most healing thing is realizing that what you sensed all along was not imagined. And if you enjoy this kind of calm, honest conversation, you may consider subscribing. Because there is something powerful about finally putting quiet truths into words. What makes this even more difficult is that manipulation is not always loud enough to be called manipulation right away. That is why so many women feel unsettled by it long before they feel certain. It often comes dressed as concern, as fragility, as misunderstanding, as I was only trying to help, as you took it the wrong way, as I guess I just can't say anything around you. And this is where mature women often face a very particular kind of inner conflict, because by this stage of life, they usually do sense what is happening more quickly. But they also know how complicated people are. They know that not every hurtful behavior comes from cruelty. They know people act from insecurity, shame, fear, neediness, loneliness, unresolved pain. They know children grow into adults carrying wounds. They know partners often avoid what they cannot emotionally manage. They know friends sometimes reach for control when they feel powerless. So the mature woman sees both things at once. She sees the pain in the other person, and she sees the pressure being placed on her. That can be a very lonely kind of clarity, because when you understand people deeply, it becomes harder to dismiss them entirely. You can often see exactly why they behave the way they do. But no one really talks about the burden of that. The burden of understanding someone's wounds while still having to protect yourself from the way those wounds behave in relationship. This happens often in families. A grown child may not mean to manipulate consciously, but may still know exactly how to trigger a mother's guilt. A husband may not think of himself as controlling, but may still use silence, helplessness, or emotional withdrawal to avoid accountability. A sibling may speak in the language of family duty while quietly pressuring the most sensitive person to carry what no one else wants to hold. And maybe you've felt this too. You leave certain conversations not angry exactly, but burdened, drained, responsible, foggy, almost as if the emotional center of gravity has been moved. And somehow you are now carrying something that did not begin as yours. That is one of the clearest signs. Manipulation often changes where the weight lands. You begin with a concern, a hurt, a boundary, a question. And somehow by the end, you are the one explaining. You are the one softening. You are the one reassuring. You are the one feeling guilty for even bringing something up. You are the one wondering whether you misunderstood the whole thing. This is why emotional manipulation can be so hard to name. It does not always force. It often redirects, and mature women sense redirection more quickly because they have lived through enough emotional patterns to know what authentic accountability feels like. They know the difference between someone feeling bad and someone being accountable. They know the difference between vulnerability and performance, between confusion and evasion, between sensitivity and control. That difference matters. A person can cry and still be manipulative. A person can sound wounded and still be avoiding responsibility. A person can seem fragile and still be moving the conversation away from the truth. A person can use love language, family language, even spiritual language to make another person doubt their own legitimate feelings. That is not always easy to admit, especially for women who value compassion, because many emotionally mature women do not want to become cynical. They do not want to assume the worst. They do not want to become unfair or hard-hearted. So they stay in the gray area longer than they should, hoping that good intentions will explain the pattern. But intention is only part of the story. Effect matters too. And a very important shift happens when a mature woman begins asking not only, did they mean to manipulate me? But also, what is the effect of this interaction on my mind, body, and sense of truth? That question can change everything, because some people may not fully intend manipulation in a calculated way. But if the repeated effect is confusion, guilt, self-doubt, pressure, or emotional self-erasure, then something important is still happening. This is especially relevant for women over 50 because many of them were raised to manage relationships from the inside, to feel the emotional weather of the room, to monitor tone, to smooth conflict, to preserve closeness, to avoid being too much, to not seem selfish, harsh, or demanding. Those teachings may have made them deeply relational. They may also have made them deeply vulnerable to guilt. And guilt is one of the most efficient roads into manipulation. Why? Because guilt bypasses clarity. It makes a woman question herself before she questions the pattern. It makes her rush toward repair before she has finished noticing the harm. It makes her feel morally responsible for other people's discomfort, disappointment, or emotional fragility. If she was taught that goodness means emotional availability, then guilt becomes especially powerful. It can turn boundaries into selfishness, truth into cruelty, distance into betrayal, self-protection into shame. This is why some women sense manipulation quickly but still struggle to act on what they sense. The instinct is there. The clarity is there. But the old training rises just as fast. Be patient. Be kind. Don't overreact. Maybe it's you. Maybe you're tired. Maybe you're being too sensitive. Maybe they need compassion more than you need clarity. This is the inner battlefield many mature women know well, not because they are weak, because they were trained to override themselves in the name of love. And often, the very people who benefit from that training are the One's most uncomfortable when she starts trusting her own perception. A mother who no longer accepts guilt trips from adult children may suddenly be called distant. A wife who no longer absorbs emotional blame may be called cold. A sister who no longer carries the emotional labor of the family may be called selfish. A friend who no longer over-explains may be called difficult to read. These labels are not random. They are often reactions to a woman stepping out of an old relational role. That is why guilt can feel so intense when she starts noticing manipulation more clearly. Because she is not only sensing the pattern itself, she is also sensing what will happen if she stops cooperating with it. That is a hard truth. Sometimes, women stay entangled in manipulation not because they do not see it, but because they understand the emotional consequences of resisting it. The conflict, the disappointment, the accusations, the withdrawal, the changed atmosphere in the family, the discomfort of no longer being the easy one to move emotionally, and yet, that discomfort is often the doorway to freedom, because once a woman begins tolerating other people's disappointment without automatically converting it into her guilt, her instincts become even sharper. She no longer needs to spend so much energy defending her first feeling. She has more room to observe, more room to listen, more room to say, something in this does not sit right with me, without rushing to apologize for saying so. One technique that sharpens instinct is to separate sympathy from agreement. This is very important. A mature woman may look at someone and genuinely see their pain. She may understand the childhood wound, the insecurity, the fear of abandonment, the shame, the emotional immaturity. She may even feel compassion for all of it, but compassion does not require surrendering clarity. You can understand why someone behaves a certain way and still refuse the behavior. You can care about their pain and still not let it rearrange your truth. You can be kind without becoming absorbent. You can stay soft-hearted without becoming easy to move through. Guilt. This distinction is one of the deepest forms of emotional maturity. Another technique is to watch for reversal. Manipulation often involves reversal. The person who caused the harm becomes the person who must be comforted. The person who avoids accountability becomes the person who needs understanding. The person who crossed a line becomes the person whose feelings now dominate the room. When this happens repeatedly, pay attention. Healthy relationships can survive discomfort. They can survive pauses. They can survive honest naming. They do not need constant emotional rearrangement to protect one person from truth. And mature women know this more and more with age, because time has shown them something younger people often miss. Repeated patterns tell the truth much more clearly than emotional moments do. Anyone can have a bad day. Anyone can become defensive once. Anyone can speak poorly under stress, but repetition reveals structure. If every difficult conversation ends with you apologizing for having feelings, if every boundary leads to someone becoming fragile, offended, or confused, if every attempt at honesty leaves you feeling like the aggressor, then your instinct is not reacting to one moment. It is reading a system. That is a powerful realization. Because the moment you begin seeing manipulation as a pattern rather than a collection of isolated misunderstandings, self-doubt starts losing some of its grip. You stop asking, was that one sentence manipulative? And begin asking, why does this interaction always leave me farther away from my own truth? That question protects dignity. It also protects peace, because for many women in this stage of life, peace is no longer found in avoiding tension at all costs. Peace begins to come from not abandoning yourself while tension is happening. That is a very different kind of peace. It is quieter, stronger, less dependent on being liked, less dependent on being seen as kind all the time, more rooted in self-respect. If this resonates with you, you're not alone. Many women reach a point where they realize their instincts were not becoming harsher. They were becoming more honest. And if you enjoy this kind of calm, thoughtful reflection, you may consider subscribing. There is something healing about hearing emotional realities named without being told you are overreacting.